Well, it is 2 o'clock, so good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Conrad Smith with AIM Transportation Solutions, and I am once again joined by AIM Regional Safety Manager John Rugarber, who will be leading today's session focused on one of the most, or probably the most important safety enforcement event in our industry, the CVSA's International Roadcheck. Now, just in case you're new to the game, the International Roadcheck is the largest targeted enforcement program on commercial motor vehicles in the world, with nearly 15 vehicles inspected per minute across North America. Now, I'm no mathematician by any stretch of the imagination, but if you crunch those numbers, I think what they say is that you have a much higher chance of being pulled over and inspected during this 72-hour blitz. And you want to be ready. And that should also be my one and only John Madden comment for this session, but no promises there. But seriously, folks, all jokes aside, with thousands of inspectors participating, this event really can have major impacts on your CSA scores, downtime, and ultimately your company's bottom line. So with that in mind, John will be walking us through what to expect from this year's road check, including how to prepare your vehicles and your drivers so that your fleet not only passes inspection, but avoids those unnecessary delays, fines, or even intervention. So today is really about getting proactive rather than reactive, and we're glad you're here with us to do just that. Now, in a perfect world, we wouldn't even be meeting here today, right? Because every fleet and every driver would remain forever ready to ace an inspection. The problem, though, is just how much time, money, resources, and attention that truly requires. And that's why we're happy to do our small part by putting on these free webinars. Now, we could certainly take it a step further with any number of AIM services. Just real quick, for example, AIM's full service truck leasing program ensures you're running late model, fuel efficient equipment that's maintained by professionals who know exactly what inspectors are looking for, whether it's brakes, tires, lights, or everything under the hood. The goal is to keep your fleet running safely and efficiently while staying one step ahead of inspections and one step closer to that operational peace of mind we all really strive for. And then real quick, beyond leasing, we offer a full suite of services, including commercial truck rentals, dedicated contract carriage. We're actually just ranked number 26 on Transport Topics top 50 dedicated carriers. We also offer used truck sales, great for avoiding those tariff surcharges everyone's talking about. We also offer freight brokerage and then a full menu of maintenance programs, everything from preventative maintenance all the way up to professional shop management. And then one final thing, I just want to say that what truly sets AIM apart is our personalized customer first approach, which is derived from being a family owned and operated company. As the largest privately held truck leasing company in the US, we combine national reach with family owned values, and that's how we've earned honors like CCJ's Innovator of the Year award for our road rescue feature on our smartphone app, while also landing on Newsweek's top 100 most loved workplaces 2 years in a row. And we actually just found out this morning that we're going to be in Newsweek magazine again as one of America's greatest mid-sized workplaces. So very excited. And if after today's session you'd like to discuss how AIM could fit into your operation, feel free to reach out. Everyone here should have my email from the webinar invite. If not, it's going to be on the final slide of John's presentation, and I'd be more than happy to talk. So, all right, that's enough. That's enough for me. It's time to dive into the topic at hand. I'll just ask that everyone please hold questions until after the presentation, just so we can stay on track and be mindful of everyone's time. And then once John wraps up, we'll open the floor up for questions. So, with that being said, John, if you're ready, sir, you can take it away.
All right. Thank you very much, Conrad. I appreciate the introduction as always. I'd like to welcome everyone. I'd like to welcome the West Coast. It's probably 11 a.m. in the morning, so good morning. For everyone else, I'd like to say good afternoon. Like Conrad mentioned, my name is John Rugarber. I'm a regional safety manager with AIM Transportation Solutions. Been with them for approximately 23 years, give or take, and I've been involved in the safety portion for about 13 years. So we had an opportunity a couple of years ago to start these webinars, and I think this may be our 13th or 14th webinar we've done on different subject matter. I think it's the third one we've done on the road checks, and they seem to go over quite well. It's a lot of information. I sit in on a lot of other webinars, and sometimes they're not, a lot of information isn't really out there. It's more of a discussion, but I try to give everyone as much information as I can. So a lot of stuff packed into these slides. As Conrad mentioned, this will all be sent to everyone who registered onto the webinar today. So you'll have a copy of the PowerPoint and some additional information also. So let's get started real quick so we don't run out of time. This webinar is going to be based on Roadcheck 2025, which is going to occur from May 13th, which is a Tuesday, through May 15th, which is a Thursday. Again, it's an annual event, and it is sponsored by the CVSA, which is the Commercial Motor Vehicle Safety Alliance. So we can move on to the next slide, and we'll get started. So it's the International Roadcheck is the Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance's CVSA annual high volume, high visibility inspection and enforcement initiative. Actually, it covers Canada, the United States, and Mexico in this International Roadcheck. As you can see over here in the little emblem, you could see Canada's flag, you could see Mexico, and then we're in the middle there. So it encompasses quite a large amount of vehicles throughout this program. It follows the North American Standard Level 1 inspection, which is a 37-step inspection process. I'm going to go into the CVSA website a little later on. I'm going to click on it just to give you a view of what it is. It's a really informative website. They have a ton of information. If you're interested in grabbing that 37-step inspection process, you can go into CVSA and it's there. I think it's free of charge if you want to grab that if you're not familiar with it. Each year, CVSA highlights a category of violations during this International Road Check. Last year, the focus was on tractor protection systems and the alcohol and controlled substance possession or use. So we talked about that last year. I got pretty much in depth into a lot of information revolving around that. Again, if anybody would like that previous 2024s, feel free to reach out to me. I forgot to mention my email was on that first slide, jrugarber@aimntls.com. So you could either reach out to Conrad or myself, and we can get you last year's PowerPoint also if anybody has any interest. All right, so anybody who registered is going to see this sheet. They've received this little road check flyer that CVSA offers to everyone. So you'll receive one. I put it onto the slide itself. It looks a little bit small. So I went ahead and went through the bullet pointed items and I'll just discuss those. They're going to come up a little bit larger so we can get a view. So on the tire portion, they're going to be looking at low tread depth. Secondarily, they're going to be listening for audible air leaks. So as the inspector walks up along the trailer or the tractor or the single truck, he'll be listening for air leaks, which one of the more common air leaks is out of the glad hands. So I could start this whole thing off by saying, first thing is have your drivers make sure they check the glad hand seals. Make sure they're not dry rotted, cracked. If they're missing, we have way bigger issues than that. If they're missing, it's not even going to be a leak. It's going to be a full-blown uh, large sound. So one of the first things you want to get your drivers is to check those glad hand seals. If you need replacement seals, get them to your drivers so that they could put them in there. They're easily replaced by the driver. You don't need a tech to do it. So really there shouldn't ever be an issue with any audible leaks coming out of the glad hand seals. Secondly, flat tires. We're going to go into a little more detail in the next few slides. So I won't get too heavy on the flat tires other than the fact that a flat tire would be indicated by less than half the cold pressure rating on the tire. So for example, if your tire is at 110 cold air at about 54 psi, you're going to be considered flat. Above that, it would be considered a low inflated tire, which could be the difference between whether you're placed out of service or whether you just get a violation. And we'll talk further as we move on about flat tires. Belt material or casing plies exposed in the tread or the sidewall of the tire itself. That should be pretty self-explanatory. If you're seeing belt material or casing plies through that anywhere on that tire, there's quite a big issue going on. It's time to get a new tire put on. before it blows out or the inspector finds that on his own. Next item, tread or sidewall separation. The tread separation, there's I haven't really ever been able to find the regulation about how much separation or how far in a screwdriver or a knife would go if the tread begins to separate from the tire itself. When the tire is manufactured, the tread is vulcanized onto the tire. So, and that's another reason why inflation is critically important, because heat is really a tire's worst enemy. And when a tire is inflated, not inflated properly, it could cause heat buildup, which then affects the vulcanization, causing many other issues. Years ago, they used to say that the retreads were poorly manufactured. Nobody wanted to use retreads. The quality of retreads today, Bandag, there's a number of different manufacturers. The quality of retreads is really good today. But part of what occurs is when the tires are run underinflated because drivers or companies haven't done their due diligence to make sure that they're properly inflated, it seems as though there's a lot more alligators or treads that are laying out on the roadway. But in essence, it's caused more by low inflation and heat buildup to destroy the tire than it is poor manufacturing processes. Next, bulges in the sidewall. If you look at some tires, you may see some bulging. You're allowed up to 3/8 of an inch of a bulge on a tire. It could be from any number of reasons. If you curb tires numerous times, you may cause some deficiency in the sidewalls, allowing the pressure to push out on that sidewall. If repairs are done on the sidewalls, usually you'll see a little blue triangle that will indicate where that repair was done, or that it was a repair. So the bulges in the sidewall, each one is on its own case, its own merits, but you want to keep an eye out for that. If you begin to see the bulges, you can see down here in this particular picture in the lower left corner of the flyer. Now that would be a bulge that definitely needed to be taken care of. I think we'd all agree upon that. It's only a matter of time before that blows out, causing a catastrophic failure. And then to the right, you could see a example of some tread wear where it's separated from the tire itself. So improper repairs, such as rubber-coated plugs in the sidewall. Really, you shouldn't be running any type of repair on the sidewalls. I mean, short of that proper repair done by a licensed repair facility, just sticking a plug or trying to put something over a cut or a tear on the sidewall is especially problematic. So if you're doing that, I would recommend that you do not. If you have any tires that are in your fleet or that you're currently running, you should probably get those replaced. You have about 2 weeks to do it. So I would get on the stick and get those repaired, because that would be a really big warning light to the officer as he walks around and starts looking at your tires to look further for any more problems. And the last would be items lodged between dual tires. This would be purely a driver controllable violation. Your drivers should be doing their pre-trip inspection, their en route inspection, and their post-trip inspection. At any point in time, they'd be able to find that things were lodged between the tires. Guys who do construction work or areas where they get off the roadway, it's critical. Dump trucks, garbage trucks, really critical for the driver to take a look between the duals and make sure that there aren't rocks, garbage, wood, anything of that nature stuck between the duals. If a driver is running the interstate, one of the big Swift, Werner, JB, any of the big guys, they're running and you run over something, advise your drivers to stop at the nearest safe location so that they could check their tires. They may not realize it, but something could have been stuck between the tires, causing some issues. Were they not to check, a couple miles up the road, here's the weigh station, and the inspector sees it, and then off to the races you go as he looks further for things. So those are some of the items that they're going to be looking for on the tire portion of it. Let's move over to the right-hand side. Under the hours of service compliance, they're going to be looking for electronic logging device tampering, including driving while not logged in, disconnected devices, and improper edits. Now that electronic logging devices have been in the system for quite a while, most drivers are familiar with them if you're using them. In the beginning, we had some pushback at AIM. Drivers would once in a while disconnect a unit. It didn't take long to find out that they had disconnected it, or they've loosened the screws, which caused the connection to kind of come loose. So we don't see that problem that often. I can't even remember the last time that's occurred anymore. But in the beginning of it, people would try different things. We are using cameras in our truck. We've had a couple instances of trying to cover the camera up a little bit, but again, that's easily found as you monitor your drivers. You could see something that on a nice bright sunny day, it looks like there's a white fog in front of your camera. That would be an indication that they're covering up that camera. Next, ghost drivers, claiming a co-driver when there is no co-driver present. Obviously, this would apply to team runs. If you got two drivers in the truck, I'm sure the larger companies, I'm sure if you got a good handle on monitoring your companies, that isn't an issue. But for the owner operators that may be out there, or small fleets, maybe two or three trucks running teams, you want to make sure that that's not occurring. Keep an eye on monitoring your logging, which you should be doing on a regular basis anyway, but that's one of the things that they will be looking for. Next item, improper use of personal conveyance, or PC, the special driving category. I have a couple slides put together further on about that, so we'll go into more detail about that. There's a lot of confusion regarding personal conveyance. When can I use it? When can't I use it? So we'll hopefully clear that up for you a little bit and get you through a clean inspection. At least they won't be getting you for the PC usage. And then right after that, we have the adverse driving. And that's always another big one. Improper use of other exceptions, including adverse driving conditions. I'm going to hopefully be able to pull up a link that's going to pull you into some questions regarding adverse driving conditions. They put some new requirements in, or new parameters where they were leaning on the dispatchers previously. Now it is partially the responsibility of the driver to be aware of what he's going into. If you know that you're running the Rockies tomorrow and there's a blizzard coming through the Rockies, you're headed from Denver over to LA, you knew the blizzard was coming, or you should have known the blizzard was coming. So to try to use the adverse weather to get over across the top of the mountain and then down into Grand Junction and over into Utah and down would not be a proper use of adverse weather or adverse driving conditions. You knew it was coming. You should have known it was coming. You should have made proper plans to allow for that. And then next, recording off-duty time while performing work for a motor carrier or a non-motor carrier. There's quite a stringent number of items that basically, if you're getting compensated for anything, that is technically needs to be logged as on-duty time. So taking the truck to get maintenance done on it is technically on-duty time. That's not off-duty time. You don't drop your trailer at the yard and your boss tells you to take the tractor 35 miles away for maintenance. That needs to be recorded. That is not off-duty time. And then again, that's where some people get confused with the PC. They try to use PC on there, but there are different criteria that allow for that. So those are the items that they're really going to be focusing on based on this little handout that you're going to have, and you'll be able to pull that off of the webinar and use that in your reference materials. All right, so this fine young man here, not sure what company he works for, not sure if it's a male or female, but he's sure doing a good job of inspecting that tire, and that's really what you want when you mention to your drivers to inspect their tires. You know, they need to bend over, lean over, walk around, step back, kneel down to be able to look at the tires. You don't want to just stand there and look at the top of the tire and assume that it's inflated and then move on. You want to make an active effort to get in there and take a look at your tires, even the backside. Okay, backside is where a lot of times you'll find the inner wheel seal leaks. that you can't see that visibly from just standing up. So make it a point to tell your drivers that inspection is the key for this tire portion at a minimum. All right, so under FMCSR's Part 393, parts and accessories necessary for safe operation. This falls under Subpart G, miscellaneous parts and accessories. Go into 393.75, and it will tell you everything that you want to know about the tire regulations. It begins with A, no motor vehicle should be operated on any tire that, number one, has body, ply, or belt material exposed. That's kind of why they identified that in the previous slide on the flyer. Has any tread or sidewall separation, is flat or has an audible air leak, and has a cut exposing ply or belt material. So I identified those 4 items in the second slide as to what they're going to be looking for. But if you want to go into the regs, 393.75 is where that's all going to start for you. All right, let's move on to the second page. Again, falls under 393.75A. Now let's get a little more into detail here. So under 393B, the front tires must have a minimum of 4/32 of tread depth, and that's in a major tread groove. I have some pictures coming up in the next slide. I'll point out the major tread groove when we get there, but you need at least a minimum of 4/32 on the front tires. On the drive and the trailer tires, you're looking at a minimum of 2/32 in any major tread groove. Okay, the easiest way to do that is to get a tread depth indicator, or I'm going to show you an example of a card that I had made up when I first started in safety 10 or 15 years ago. It's really a nice little tool to carry around. Guys tend to lose the tread depth indicators quite frequently, so that'll be coming up in a minute. An interesting thing, a lot of people say that you can't run recaps on the front tires of a truck. And you are able to. You're allowed to if you'd like to. The liability involved in that, in the event of a cap coming off, is quite high, and that may be why most, if not all, companies do not put recaps on their front steers. But based on this 393.75D, no bus shall be operated with regrooved, recapped, or retreaded tires on the front wheels. So just to clarify that, I got a lot of pushback. I've gotten it over the years. Your drivers are under the impression that you can't run recaps or retreads on the steers of a truck, and you could if you would like. Most companies don't because of the liability, but you could. But secondarily, under E, a regrooved tire with a load carrying capacity equal to or greater than 4,920 pounds shall not be used on the front wheels of any truck or tractor. So that may fall into a little bit of play in terms of guys using regrooves under that particular criteria there. But just to clarify that a little bit. And then when you get down into the F, G, and H's of this regulation, you're getting pretty far into the weeds there. You're talking about speed restricted tires, tire loading restrictions, and also tires that are on manufactured homes. So unless anybody on this call really runs those type of operations, probably don't have to go that far into the woods. You could probably stop at about B or C, and pretty much cover yourself there. So let's get into some pictures, because pictures, as they say, are worth 1,000 words. So looks like we have this fine young man, and he doesn't look like a DOT inspector, but he looks like he may be trying to be one in the future. But he's taking a close look at his sidewall. So he's looking for cracks. He may be looking at trying to see the date code on the tire. So for those who don't know, it's a 4-digit date code, usually in an oblong type of circle, I guess if you want to call it that. First 2 digits are the week of the year. The second 2 digits are of the year itself. So if a tire is manufactured this week, would be marked with a 1725. So a 17 would indicate the 17th week, and the 25 obviously indicates the 2025. Just a little tidbit there. But I'm hoping that he's making a good inspection throughout the entire tire itself. Second picture here, we have the tire tread depth indicator. This is an awesome tool right here. It's a great tool to have. I must have 30 of them throughout my personal vehicle, I've had them in trucks. You know, they have a little clip. You could put them in your shirt pocket if you'd like. But inevitably, we've handed them out at numerous safety meetings. And I'm telling you, if you go back a week later, if one guy has it, you'll be lucky. So again, in the later on in this thing, I'm going to show you a picture of the cards we made. But this tread depth indicator really, if you could get this, would be the awesome thing to get for your drivers. They're not expensive, but they're just difficult to hold on to. All right, picture number 3. This is kind of talking about tread depth and the loss of some tread depth in the tire itself. Not necessarily an out of service on this one. Obviously, it'd be a violation because one of the tread lines is below 2/32. But you know, here's where you get into the out of service portion. It's you got to go back and research a little. One of the under the CVSA booklet, which I'm going to have a picture of later, under say it's pages 60 to 64, it'll give you a really good explanation as to what would be considered out of service. For this example, 75% or more of the tread width would be loose or missing and more than 12 inches in circumference, so meaning a circle. And that would fall under 393.75A2. So you'd have to measure that up on a 10. Let's say you got a 10-inch span here, 75%, 7.5 inches of width is missing. You know, there's a little bit of calculation. So for any of you people who are engineers or mathematicians, you'll love that stuff. For the people like me who failed math in high school, I don't like that number stuff so much. Now, what I like though is when I look down here to the lower left corner, that's pretty self-explanatory. I think we'd all agree that that would be an out of service tire. You can clearly see the bias, the radial plies coming through there. No question asked. You don't have to figure it out. Don't have to be a mathematician. That tire is out of service. And excuse me, if you look closely, you can see that that tire's been run for quite a while like that. Kind of the edges are worn out. So this driver should have found that issue quite a while ago. All right, next picture. This is a truly out of service tire. He probably flat spotted it, maybe dragging it in the yard or something. Down here at the bottom, there's really no tread depth involved in there. So that'd be a clean cut example of a tire that's placed out of service. And the last picture, again, same kind of similar situation, flat spotted, but you can also see on the far edges, you can see the cord showing through. That didn't occur overnight. That driver had his pre-trip to find it. If he's still running with it, he had his en-route inspection to find it, and he should have found it at the end of the day to try to get that repaired. So really good idea, really good example on those pictures as to what to look for. Next slide. So now here we're getting into weeds again. Just thought I'd throw this out there. I found it interesting. This is in the regs, 393.75 IT. Let's say, for example, you had a tire with a cold inflation pressure rating of 110 pounds, so 55 or below. Let's get really sticky, call it 54, would be less than half, which would be technically a flat tire. But you're running currently at 58, so technically that would be a low inflated tire. Well, the feds have thought of that. So they made this little chart here that's in the regs if you'd like to find it, where you're going into a weigh scale, you just run, let's say 55 miles an hour for the sake of the discussion, for the last hour or so. You pull in, your tire, the officer sticks the tires and finds out that it's at about 69 psi, low inflated. But he realizes you just ran for an hour down the interstate, if not longer. He will go ahead and subtract 15 miles per hour, or 15 psi, I'm sorry, from that initial reading, which if you're at 69 is now going to bring you down. 69 minus 15 is going to bring you down to 54 psi, and you just went from underinflated to now you're looking at a flat tire being placed out of service and being stuck at the scale house waiting for a vendor to come out to either fix your tire or put a new tire on. The old days when you could look at a tire, there's drivers that still believe they can look at a tire and tell if it's flat or not. It's, most tires today, the radial tires, have the bulge around the bottom. It's really not a good indicator. I would not recommend telling my drivers to just look at a tire. There's something to be said for thumping it, quote, thumping it with a hammer, the heavy duty stick. Um, there is a different sound, but it's probably not a good enough indication of whether I have a flat tire or not. It definitely would not tell you whether you're at 69 psi or 79 psi. So again, the tire inflator, or the inflation gauge, is really the ideal thing that you would want to check your tires with. So I thought I'd throw that in there. Maybe somebody could print that out and stick it on their wall and just reference that. Went further discussions with their drivers. Okay, and here's the page I was kind of looking for. This is really an overview of what we had just kind of talked about. An interesting thing too is I'm sure that most companies would recommend their drivers to use flashlights. I can't count the number of times we've had drivers call us with issues at 4 in the morning. We've asked them if they have a flashlight handy, and they do not. So they can't even see the issue that they're really trying to look into. Tell your drivers to pick up a flashlight. That's how you can properly, you know, inspect your tires and the rest of your truck as you're doing a pre-trip or a post-trip when it gets dark. I talked earlier, number two, get a tire tread depth gauge, keep it with you when changing trucks. A lot of guys, we've had many calls where drivers will swear that their tread depth is low. They'll send us pictures. Over the years, you just get a feel. You can look at it and tell them it's not. It may look low. Surprisingly, if they were to stick it, it probably would end up being 4 30 seconds on a trailer tire, which would be legal. But I understand from a distance, it may look a little low. And then another thing you'd want to do is, you're checking your truck stationary. Take a second, roll it forward so that you can look underneath and have that maybe flat spotted tire that a driver before you left for you. So you could see that when it rolls to the top of the tire as you roll forward or backwards. So make sure you tell your drivers to move the truck back and forth so that they could see the entire circumference of the tire along the tread. These pictures here, these are the cards I was talking about. This is the back of the card. You could maybe take your logo of your company or whatever you'd like in the front, contact numbers, safety department numbers. But here, and I grabbed this from, actually, it was a regular car facility that I was getting my car worked on, and they had done it. So I kind of transferred the information over to apply to a tractor trailer and just kind of put it in there. And it's easy to put in your pocket. It's easy to carry around. It gives them a rough estimate. At least that may save that phone call from the guy thinking it's low and he sticks his card in there. And wouldn't you know it, he's seeing green, so he's good to go. So just a nice little tidbit. Keep around. You get 500 of them printed, probably for a very nominal cost. So I'd highly recommend that. We still use those to this day at AIM. Just thought I'd throw that in there. In fact, I didn't even think about that till this morning, and I added that in. So, all right, let's look at the out of service criteria. This is what the book's going to look like on the left-hand side, 2024. Usually they have guys that are looking really old, but this guy looks quite young, so they must be moving up to the younger people. So there's a DOT inspector. Can't tell what state he's out of. I can't see that. Anyway, out of the out of service criteria. So to be placed out of service, you're looking at 230 seconds or less in any two adjacent major tread grooves. So it's got to be two side-by-side grooves that are less than 230 seconds of an inch to fulfill the out of service criteria. Again, like I showed earlier in that picture, any part of the belt material or the ply showing in the tread, we looked at that. That's pretty self-explanatory. Sidewall, cut, torn, exposing steel or fabric ply, same thing. Remember I mentioned observable bulge, bump, or knot in the sidewall, but allowing for 3/8 of an inch of a bulge due to a repair. So if you have any bulges, they do have a tool. It's got I don't know how to describe it, but DOT officers do have a tool, and you could purchase that tool actually, that you put it over the sidewall. If it pushes it away from the sidewall, that bulge is larger than 3/8 of an inch. Next item down, tire has a noticeable leak or 50% of the max inflation on the sidewall. So we kind of talked about that. I don't need to beat that to death any longer. Although something you want to keep in mind also that falls into the something in between the duals is the tire contacting any part of the vehicle. Also, are the duals contacting each other by some chance? So keep an eye on that as you inspect your vehicle or have your drivers inspect their vehicles, that you don't want the tire rubbing against any portion of the tire or any portion of the vehicle. And you definitely don't want the dual tires to be rubbing together. That something could be wrong. And that's where a low inflation or a flat tire, now that it's collapsed, that sidewall could be rubbing against the good tire's sidewall. So, and then you could find additional information in this book down here in that lower left-hand corner. You'll see additionally section A 1 through 10 and section B 1 through 12. That gets again way into the weeds, which we don't really need to get that far today. Let's move into the hours of service compliance portion that they're going to be looking at. These are the numbers that were pulled from last year's inspection, 2024. You can go in here under the driver out of service violations, which that comprises the hours of service, not having a license, no medical card, false logs, and suspended. But we're going to focus on hours of service, so you can see where item 1 was the driver violation is the out of service. There were 870 out of service violations, which was about 32.1% of the total driver out of service violations. Not surprisingly, that's why they may have chose to make hours of service one of the focus points of this year's inspections, because of that. Basically, 1 in every 3 drivers that had been inspected for the driver portion was placed out of service. And again, that's looking at last year's numbers. Next year, when we do this, I'll be more than happy to put 2025s on there. All right, now that being said, take a look at an ELD here. I did have a paper also that I could have put on, but we're going to focus more on the ELDs. But what they're going to be doing is they're going to be looking for your 14-hour shift limit. Make sure that you're not going over your 14-hour workday. Making sure that you got your 34-hour restart. Quite a few mistakes are made. Guys are trying to cut it close. They try to get in at that last second so they can get their day started and start being making some progress. And they get just ahead of the curve at 33 hours and 59 minutes, and they click go. And now they're in violation because they didn't get their 34-hour restart. So just make sure you tell your drivers to not rush into that. Make sure you get your full 34. They're going to be looking at split sleeper berth rules for any of companies out there running the splits, or any drivers that are running split sleeper berths. You may want to touch base on that stuff, refresh some memories. The 8-2 split or 7-3, they're going to look for that with the 7, and then you're going to have an additional couple hours. You could sit in the passenger seat if you're not driving, either before or after the initial 7 hours. You're able to sit up and talk to your driver. You don't have to lay in the back the whole time. 11-hour drive limit. We're going to talk about adverse driving, which could apply to that if needed. Form and manner. Another big thing. This was big with paper logs, and even with the electronic logs. Certain things need to be taken care of, and the form and manner violations are the most common. They're the little nickel and dime ones. You forgot to dot the I, cross the T. You want to make sure you put the full name of the town. You could or city or village. You could abbreviate the state. You cannot abbreviate the town. You need the date, the total miles driving, truck or trailer number. Name of the carrier should be in there already. You need to sign your log at the end of the day. Make sure that they do that. Make sure if there's any remarks if needed in there. Edits. Make sure that the edits are in there. Make sure your shipping documents, name of the shipper, the commodity. Make sure all that's filled out properly. Those are easy catches for a DOT officer to just look at it right away and say, you forgot to sign yesterday's. You forgot to put where's the shipper and commodity? Where's your invoice number? If all that's in order, they just move on, and it makes your life a whole lot easier. And then depending on what you're running, if you're only open 6 days a week, you're going to be running 60 hours in 7 days. If you're open 7 days a week, then you're going to be running a 70-hour, 8-day week. So keep an eye on some of that stuff also. All right, here we're going to try this. I practiced this with Conrad earlier. So we go into here, if you go into hours of service under FMCSA and just skip the verification, you'll be able to get a ton of information and a breakdown of additional information here. I think it should be over here now. Or was it earlier? Let's see. Where was I?
You had it right the first time, John.
Okay, good.
There
I'll
you
put
go.
it.
Perfect.
Okay. So just really good information here. You go much more detail and further with, go in and you can get all the information you need. I added these on my slide, but I'm not going to open them now, obviously. But there's a ton of information here, printouts, handouts. They have some PowerPoint presentation slides that you could take a look at if you'd like further information. So some really good stuff there if you wanted to spend that additional time and go in there. All right, so let's talk about adverse driving conditions and their definitions. This was the previous definition. And as you can see down here, it really focused on none of which were apparent on the basis of information known to the person dispatching. It's now changed and they've made some of the responsibility on the driver now. So a driver immediately prior to beginning the duty day or immediately before beginning driving, after a qualifying rest break or sleeper berth, and the motor carrier themselves immediately prior to dispatching the driver. So now there's two entities that really should know whether or not you're going to run into a blizzard or a tornado or a hurricane or whatever the case may be. So kind of a little bit more onus on the driver now to know. With technology, we all have smartphones. You have the tablet. There's many different ways to find out news. It's not like the days of old where you take off and you didn't have to call anybody or talk to anybody for 5 days. Next item, can the drivers use the adverse driving conditions exception to cover delays caused by? Obviously, accidents involving the driver, no, you cannot use adverse. Detention time, breakdowns, or enforcement inspections, the answer is no. Loading or unloading is not adverse. Road constructions or detours, no, except when the driver could not reasonably know about the construction detour prior to driving. Again, not that you can't use it, just make sure that your driver edits or notates on his log if he decides to use it. The Florida Turnpike, there's a huge 10-car accident. The driver's coming all the way down from Alabama. He had no idea that accident was there. That may be a proper use of adverse. Again, get in touch with the safety department, call your manager, call your dispatcher, talk it further and decide whether or not that would be a reasonable use of adverse conditions. I would not just leave it up to the decision of the driver to decide he or she wants to use adverse without running it through the safety department or some other managerial type of position. Personal conveyance. So again, I'm going to try this little trick here. Let's see if it works a second time. Oh, looks like I may be lucky. How's that looking, Conrad?
Perfect.
Good deal. All right. So if you go into that that link that I just clicked on, this is where it's going to take you under personal conveyance guidance. It's going to have some really detailed questions and answers as to when personal conveyance can be used. So again, I just wanted to put the link in there. And for those who don't know, it's there. For you people who do know or use it commonly, then this shouldn't be new to you. But it's a really great resource to use if you want to go in there and look further about the definitions of personal conveyance. I kind of did my own little thing on the next two slides. You're going to kind of talk about that. So personal conveyance, I had mentioned to Conrad earlier, for the life of me, I could not get this question mark to turn green. I was trying to get it green, which would indicate this is when you can use PC, but I couldn't get it, so we're going to have to move on with a blue question mark. But if you're moving to lodging, rest, or entertainment, so you're done your delivery and you're going to do one of these three items, you can use PC to do those three items. if that's what it's being used for. If you're moving at the request of a safety official during off-duty time for any myriad reasons. If that were to occur, again, I would edit it. I'd make the remark in my logbook, make sure that it's explained. So tomorrow, if you were to get DOT'd, you could explain to the officer what occurred and he would know. If you completed the loading or unloading and you're able to travel to a safe location, and really the caveat to that would be the first location that is reasonably available. You don't drive 75 miles after you're done delivering, passing 4 pilots, well, 2 pilots, 1 TA, and 1 Loves to get to the next stop, which is going to take you, ironically, closer to your next pickup. That's what they look for. So you could finish loading, pull out, use PC to get to the nearest safe location. If a pilot's a mile up the road, that would be a perfect use of PC in that instance. You're off for the weekend. You want to transport personal property while off duty. Another proper use of personal conveyance. I did it quite a bit back in the day when I would used to take the tractor home to clean it or to do different things, and I would use PC. Another item, commute from the terminal to home. In other words, you're done your workday, so that would probably be similar to personal property. I'm taking the truck home. I'm going to park it outside of my house. From drop lots to home, you're done. You've dropped your trailer. You're going back home. You can do it. And for those people, maybe the oil well guys, you're at a work site and you're able to make it home with the truck or the tractor, then you're allowed to do that also. And then authorized use of a CMV for travel home after work at an off-site location. So kind of similar to the one above. So those are some of the general, it's just an overall of proper use of personal conveyance. Again, if you have any questions, I would run it by my manager, dispatcher, safety department before you start using that. If you can't tell, this poor guy isn't the one that's going to be able to use personal conveyance. So one of the big things that officers look for is movement to enhance operational readiness. You delivering your load and moving 50 miles north from New Jersey into New York, getting further up because you have a pickup in Massachusetts. That's what they look for. That would not be the proper use of personal conveyance. Again, I'd mentioned this earlier in the beginning of the webinar, time spent moving a commercial motor vehicle for purposes of maintenance. You bring the truck in, you drop the trailer, your boss tells you, I need you to take it to the shop. You need to get maintenance done on it, and the shop is 30 miles away. That would not be, you can't go on PC. You need to be on duty, and that's driving time on duty for that purpose. After being placed out of service for exceeding drive time. So you've already driven over your 11 hours. The officers placed you out of service. You do not use PC to go somewhere once you've been in that predicament. Unless, naturally, there's always a caveat with rules and regulations, unless so directed by a law enforcement officer. So again, every case is going to be different, but follow his lead when you make that decision. Continuation of a commercial motor vehicle trip to fulfill a business purpose kind of falls into the one over here, movement to enhance. I mean, you could kind of put those two together. Traveling to the terminal after loading or unloading. Just to get back to the terminal is not proper use of personal conveyance. Okay. And your company may establish more restrictive PC limitations. So really, regardless of what the feds have made up, if your company has particular rules in place, then those are the rules that you need to follow. They could supersede the feds rules. So again, it's another reason to get in touch with your safety department, dispatcher, manager, and get that figured out before you get inspected and placed out of service for improper use of PC. And I kind of like to add a little bit of information to the end of these webinars, just in terms of information and resources. These are some of the links. I'm not going to open these, but links that you can go in to get more information. They're all good links. Down here at the very bottom, hours of service at dot.gov. You could email them with any of your questions. They're very good at responding. I will admit I've used them a number of times. I was reluctant at first. I thought it would be a federal bureaucracy that I'd never hear from, but they did respond. They're very helpful, definitely worth using if you have any questions about any of the regulations or how to use them. And then next, we're going to talk about seatbelt usage. I put this in every one. Uh, I think one of the biggest things I want to point out here is and reinforce to your drivers to not remove the seatbelt until the officer sees that the seatbelt is buckled and still on. I understand drivers want to try to do the right thing. They want to be ready. They want to have their paperwork together. So when the officer gets to the front door, that it's all right there and you hand it to him and he asks you, the next words out of his mouth are, "Did you have your seatbelt on?" And you're going to say yes. Problem is, it isn't on, and that's what he saw. So please, over and over and over again, I hear drivers getting seatbelt tickets, and the response is, "I had it on, and I took it off to reach over to my glove box to reach up in the little area above the driver, and he said I didn't. I said I did, and yet the driver still gets the seatbelt ticket." So, if anything, stress to your drivers, especially during this time of inspections, to keep the belt on until the officer sees it. 2020, I went back to the previous road checks. There were no numbers available. Not sure if they had inspections during COVID. That may be the reason, but it wasn't there to be found. 2021, there were 464 violations. 22, there were 472. 23, there were 931 violations. So what the feds decided that they were going to put together a survey. And I'd mentioned this to Conrad earlier. I went in and checked. The survey has been closed as of August 12th of 24. There were 5 comments made. So, and one of them was from the ATA, which they respond to everything. So basically 4 people responded out of at least 1 million drivers. Who knows how many more companies. So, and then 2024's numbers were 535. So, not quite sure. They were trying to find out why drivers weren't wearing their seatbelts, get a better understanding of the perception and behavior, but they were not able to do that with only four responses. Now, keep in mind that it does make a CSA impact, and that's 7 points under 392.16 driving of a commercial motor vehicle. So, failure to wear that seatbelt will impact the driver and the company's CSA score at 7 points. Remaining on the driver's history for 3 years, it'll remain with the company for 2. So for if nothing else, try to get them to understand the CSA impact, not even necessarily their own personal impact. Okay, and here's this gentleman. He's back again. He's on the right side this time. He doesn't look any younger though. But this is the information for the out of service criteria booklet, which again I mentioned is going to look like this. There's the link to get in there to the commercial. Let's see, I'm going to push my limits here. I see Conrad smiling, and by golly, it looks like it works. So this is the CVSA website. You can see all the information here. It's really a great website to go to if you're looking for more information. I'd highly recommend doing that. You could even buy some cool shirts and some cool stuff if you wanted. So nice little website to go to. I'd highly recommend it. But going back to here, the handbook and pictorial, which we supply our safety managers with one each year, an updated one. A member price, if you are a member of CVSA, is $45. If you're not, it's $50. I say at every road check webinar, any webinar I bring this up, it's the best investment you could ever make. It's the best $50 you could spend. And ironically, they make an electronic publication at the same price. Who would have thought? You would think the electronic would be a little cheaper, but it's the same price. So I'm a paper guy. I love the feel of paper. I love the sound of it. I love to be able to write on it. So I buy the book when we get a chance. So I always kind of end with these anymore. This is the Book of Knowledge, the FMCSRs. Who knows if this is the original one, but it sure looks good. It looks to be about 400 years old. Who knows? I'm sure wagons back in the day used to have regulations, but today we're looking at a little bit more current one. And no, I'm not a salesman for J.J. Keller. It just so happens we do use their books. They're very comprehensive. We in the safety department use the much larger one. It's got some more information in it. This is a pocketbook handbook for drivers that we do give those to the drivers also when we do orientation. Um, but really a good book to get. I'm sure there's other manufacturers, but I'm just familiar with JJ, and uh, the book kind of sticks out there on the slide, so I always put it in there so people, if you're looking for more information, that's a great resource to go to. So with that, I'm going to close. Like Conrad mentioned earlier, you could see his information is right there in the middle. Conrad Smith and his email if you'd like to know anything about marketing or some of AIM's services. And then again, my name and email is down below, jrugarber at aimntls.com. And as always, I want to say it's a pleasure. I love doing these. I actually had to make it a point to not run over in time because I could go on forever about this. So I have my little stopwatch going, and I think I'm good. I'm at about 55 minutes. So I got 5 minutes to spare for any questions, but I want to thank everybody for attending. Thank you for staying on, and hopefully we'll see you again in the near future.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, as John mentioned, if anyone has any questions, you can either type them into the chat or raise your hand, and I can activate your mic if you prefer that route. So, just give it a second here, see if anyone has any questions before we wrap up. John, do you think if someone dresses their drivers in CVSA swag that they'll get a break if they get pulled over?
Probably not because they're not associated with law enforcement per se. It's a nonprofit
Yeah.
organization that does its best. So I'm sure the officer would know it. It wouldn't hurt. Anything helps, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. All right.
Well,
Well,
actually, though, so well now that you've said that, and I probably have another minute left or so, I would like to say that a big indicator for law enforcement is a clean truck. Now, I know you can't always keep the outside clean, but to pull up to a waste station with the dash covered with papers and garbage and soda cups and coffee cups and even that being said, when they open the door and a coffee cup falls out, it doesn't set a good example. So,
yeah.
you know, would it help to have a CVSA sweatshirt on? Maybe. But if you open the door and four coffee cups fall out in your logbook, and probably not a good sign. So, presentation is, what do they say?
Yeah.
Presentation is 90% of it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And we actually did get a question from Steve here. He's asking non ELD drivers. Our driver goes into the site, picks up a truck, but does not go on duty. We are just tracking the miles on non ELD drivers. Do we have to log in on duty?
Any any to on duty not driving, that would be on duty not driving time.
Okay.
I mean, he's not using PC. He can't use personal conveyance. So if you're going in and you're going to drop a trailer, and then if you go to any of the infamous drop yards, it's going to take 45 minutes to find a trailer that you got to pick up. That's 45 minutes that should be on duty not driving. Um, so yeah, you're on duty not driving. And actually, I forgot to mention that when you should be keeping 7 or 8 days worth of paper logs in the truck with the driver, even if he's on his ELD, because if the ELD were to break down, he's going to need to go back and recreate those logs so that he has them. I forgot to mention that earlier. So keeping 8 days of logs uh, is mandatory, and also having, if you're running ELD, make sure that you have the three criteria: being able to transfer the logs, the information that the officer could say, do you have the information that tells you how to transfer logs to me? There were three criteria. They need to have those. Usually the ELDs will have them in the unit, but make sure your drivers know how to get in there to find that, to show the officer. It doesn't have to be in paper, doesn't have to be in a binder, but he does have to be able to show it to the officer that he knows how to go in and find that information when requested.
Perfect. All right. All right. I'm not seeing any other questions. So, as John mentioned earlier, everyone who registered for this webinar will receive a follow-up email, probably if not tomorrow, Monday, and that email is going to include a link to the recording of today's session, along with some extra road check preparation materials that we've pulled together for you. And then, of course, if you do end up having a question that wasn't answered here today, John's email address will also be included in that email if you want to connect one-on-one. And then, of course, if you're interested in learning more about AIM services, you can visit us at aimntls.com or just Google AIM Transportation Solutions to get to our website. And of course, you can always email me directly, and I'd be happy to help however I can. And with that, just want to say thank you again so much for joining us. And thank you, John, for another great informative webinar.
My pleasure. I look forward to seeing everybody again.